Hello everyone, my name is Code Gorilla, and in this video I'm going to be running Anodyne 2 Return to Dust. This will be a run of the any percent good ending category, run on the Nintendo Switch version of the game. Anodyne 2 Return to Dust is an indie action-adventure game released in 2019 and the sequel to Anodyne, which was featured at SGDQ 2023. While it features much of the top-down 2D gameplay from the first game, it adds to that a layer of 3D exploration as well, resulting in a speedrun that combines and rewards both straightforward execution and clever use of tricks and glitches. One word of precaution before I get started with the run. There is a trick used in various places throughout the game that involves rapidly pausing and unpausing the game in order to extend your horizontal distance in the air, known as pause gliding. I will try to warn as these come up. If you are sensitive to rapidly cycling screens, I recommend you look away at those times. Now with that warning out of the way, we'll go through the settings real quick and get started on the actual run. That's the credits, not the settings. Settings! Alright, we want show text immediately on, and we want camera distance and speed maxed out. Double health and invincibility are off, saving is on, skip dialogue is on, flip controls is off. And we're going to set this to simplified Chinese because it has the least amount of text in the game. And with that, we can get started here in... I'm just gonna set up my notes just in case. We'll get started in a 3, a 2, a 1, a go. So right off the bat, we have a little bit of an introductory cutscene. We're gonna actually skip the second half of this cutscene by jumping out of the cutscene trigger as soon as we gain control of our character. That's gonna look a little something like this. And just like that, we are off into the tutorial. The tutorial is going to give you a feel for the core gameplay loop of the game. You explore the 3D world to find 2D world. You explore the 2D world to get collectibles, usually cards and dust. And then you turn in those collectibles to unlock more parts of the 3D world, rinse and repeat. In particular, in the tutorial, we're going to be collecting the 3 elements of nurturing, or as I like to call them, the 3 elements of a balanced breakfast. We've just picked up a bowl of cereal there. We're going to do our first glitch of the run. That was a pause float. The way pause floating works is if you jump and then immediately pause the game, you will maintain your upwards momentum for as long as you leave the game paused. Doing this, you can gain arbitrary amounts of height, which, as you can imagine, is very useful in a variety of places throughout the run. That was a little tiny baby pause glide. You'll see some longer ones in a minute here. That was our second element of nurturing, a bottle of milk. Here's another pause float. 1, 2, 3. The timing for everyone is different, and you just have to memorize the timings. But fortunately, there is a timer on the pause screen so that you can use that to time out how long you've been paused for. Here is our third and final part of the tutorial. It's going to give us a feel for the combat in this game. You have a vacuum cleaner. You use it to inhale blocks and enemies and shoot them at other blocks and enemies. It's also going to give you a feel for a very common level design pattern in this game, where there is a split path with a left, with 2 halves, and you have to do both halves in order to progress where they rejoin. So, did the left side, did the right side, now we can go forward. And here's our third and final element of nurturing, or element of a balanced breakfast. It's supposed to be a temperature regulator. It looks like a coffee maker to me. Fits the theme. And just like that, we are out of the tutorial. So what would normally follow is a tutorial boss fight. But the way they try to force you to fight the boss fight is by locking you in with invisible walls. However, they don't give you an invisible ceiling. So we're going to do some clever pause floating to get out of that area and move on with the rest of the game. Hold for title drop. Title dropped. While I'm doing that pause float to get out of the tutorial boss, I am going to be setting up for another trick, the next trick, called save floating. It works exactly the same as pause floating, except you use the dialog box from interacting with the save point instead of using the pause screen. But that means you have to leave that on screen, which means you need to turn off the automatic text skip. 1, 2. So we're going to do that here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see the ceiling there narrows in the center, so you have to actually go forward a bit, which is why you saw me do 2 different pause floats there to make sure I actually hit the opening. Now, unfortunately, because I turned off text skip, I do have to mash through this little bit of text. This is a tutorial about how the prism works. It starts at level 1. It can hold 50 dust. Every 4 cards you turn in lets it hold another 50 dust. And you'll see more of it get repaired there. At the top of this float, we're going to be doing a pause glide, so this is your first photosensitivity warning of the run. And our target is this debug platform way out of bounds over here. It's me turning text skip back on, because we want it on now. And so the cubes on this platform are cutscene triggers. Debug cutscene triggers. And we are driving through them in a specific way to stack 2 cutscenes on top of each other. We are upgrading the prism, which, as mentioned, lets it hold another 50 dust. And we are clearing the storm. Now, clearing the storm is the thing that you normally do at the end of Act 1, after you've collected all 4 cards from Act 1, and you've filled the prism up with 100 dust, and you've spent all of that dust in order to clear the storm. By doing it now, we have gotten the upgraded vacuum cleaner by that you normally get at the end of Act 1, which lets our vacuum cleaner hold 90 dust instead of 60, and also collect 2 to 3 more times dust from the various dust drops on the ground. We have a rhythm minigame here. I'm going to shut up for this because I tend to mess up my inputs if I try to talk during them, so... Now, you might be wondering, this is one of the Act 1 2D sections. Why are we doing this if we have skipped the requirements necessary to clear the storm and we've unlocked Act 2? A valid question. And the catch is that in order to get into Act 3, you actually need all 12 of the cards from both Act 1 and Act 2. So, we still have to do the Act 1 2D sections. The main benefit of clearing the storm early is getting the upgraded vacuum cleaner. To go from Act 2 to Act 3, you need 200 dust between the prism and your tank, and you need all 12 cards. In any case, this is Mysterio Weisel. The main gameplay gimmick here are these baby slimes. If they're destroyed for any reason, a gate will pop up to block your path forward. And when I say any reason, I mean it. They are incredibly fragile, and if you so much as bump into them, they will die. That said, there's a spot later on in this 2D section where the fastest way through is to use one as ammunition, kill the target that we actually care about with it, and then reset the room to let us progress. Turn in our 2 keys here so we can move forward. At the end of this, there is a boss, but we are going to be skipping that boss fight. The way you skip boss fights in this game is if you can hit the boss with something before you fully enter the room, and then enter the room while the boss isn't hit stun, the cutscene to trigger the boss fight never actually happens, so you can just walk right past. And just like that, we are done with Mysterio Weisel. We have our first of 4 cards of Act 1. And we are moving on to Brand Malignan. Now, as mentioned, we will need 200 dust in order to progress the story between the Prism and our tank. Since our tank only holds 90, that means we're going to have to turn in dust twice before we can get to Act 3. We're going to be doing our first turn-in after Brand Malignan here. Which I only mention now because I won't have time to mention it once we get out of Brand Malignan. 1, 2, 3. Please don't turn me around, video game. Alright, so this is Brand Malignan. We've got another rhythm minigame. These are essentially auto-scrollers, so a good spot for a host to chime in with any sort of updates. So this is Brand Malignan. The theme here, as you will be very quickly able to tell, is fire. There are fire slimes, there are fire shooters, there's fire that pops up out of the ground and chases you, there's gates that we need to burn down, there's just freestanding fire that gets in your way and we need to put it out with water slimes. You get the idea. The other thing you see a couple spots in this are the fireball shooters are very cycle based. So there's a couple rooms where you need to make some precise movements to get an early cycle, like this one. You gotta move fairly quickly to get that first fireball. Here we just need to light all these slimes on fire. We speed it up slightly by shooting the last slime into the oncoming fireball. Got our first key. Is once again a split path. Here we're going to put out some fires. Here it's faster to face tank the fire than it is to legitimately put it out. This is another room where we're trying to get an early cycle. That second fireball is what we want. Just like that. And there's another key. This boss is theoretically skippable, but there's no known setup for it, and the actual positioning is like sub-pixel perfect. But also, an optimal boss fight does not lose that much time compared to skipping the boss. That was a pretty good boss fight there, so certainly happy with that. So, as we come out of here, we're going to be doing a very big pause float and a pause glide over to that debug platform again, so we can turn in dust and upgrade the prism again at the same time. I'm going to need to be quiet and concentrate for this, so consider this your photosensitivity warning. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3. Thankfully, some of these rocks are fake. Alright, I turned off text skip there because in order to get credit for these 2 cutscenes, you need to let this play out until the camera fully pans back before you advance the text box. Otherwise, the first cutscene is going to finish before the second one gets to the part that matters, and you won't get credit for both of them. I'll be turning on tech skip again in just a second here, basically on our very next pause float, as we head over to Gustine Papellum, who is right over here. And that one you don't really need to time, because it's just how fast can you menu to turn tech skip back on? Because by the time you've done that, you're already high enough. That's another rhythm minigame down. The gameplay gimmick to Gustine Papellum here are these tongue levers. So you pull on these levers, and it causes these tongue walls to either retract or extend, depending on the room. And you use them to open up paths and lick enemies and NPCs and all that good stuff. So they look like that. Some of them will stay once you move them. Some of them will slowly go back to their original position. That said, there's not a whole lot to say about this section. Gonna lick that enemy. We got our first key. You'll notice once again the split path pattern. I'm going to stop calling it out now because it's just all over the place. In the next room, I'm going to do some precise movements to get a quick kill on this enemy. Like that. Feels very smooth and fluid if you get it, and it feels very bad if you don't, because you have to go manipulate that enemy a bunch more. We got a boss here. This boss is not skippable in the same way that the other ones are. Run down here for this bottom block. It's a little unfortunate to miss and hit one of the other blocks, but that happens sometimes on that boss. But in any case, that is that boss done. Gustine Papellum done and dusted. We can move on to the Great Guam. So on our way to the Great Guam, we're going to be doing our third and final 3D exploration glitch, known as ride scale clipping. You've seen me turn into a car to get around faster. That's what's known as ride scale. Ride scale clipping is when you, as a human, wedge yourself in a corner, spin the camera, and turn into a car with the right timing. You will clip straight through the wall, just like that. Talk to these 4 NPCs. That clip basically lets us skip a long maze section that we would have to navigate to get to that little room. We're going to do a similar clip to get back out. But first we got to do this 2D section, which means this rhythm minigame. So, this is Great Guam. In terms of gameplay mechanics, it introduces a new enemy type known as mini Guams. They're these little mounds of dirt that scurry around, and if you walk over them, a mole-like enemy, those that you just saw, pops out of the ground, at which point you can interact with it normally. They're not terribly threatening because they don't actually damage you until they pop out of the ground, at which point they're stationary, so you can kind of just ignore them unless you need them to clear a specific room. The upper half of this room has some memory tests in the form of dark rooms. The dark rooms are the exact same layout as the light rooms before them, but with the red ropes removed so that you can actually progress. And so it's just a matter of, do you remember the layout? Spoilers, yes, I do. That's that set of dark rooms. And here, we've just got some enemies to clear out. And then we've got a boss here, but we are going to be skipping this boss like we skipped the first boss. We're just going to wait for one of these enemies to come to us, inhale it, shoot it out, enter the room while the boss is in hit stun, and walk right on by. And just like that, we are done with Great Guam. And that is the last of the cards that we need for Act 1. Once again, our dust tank is getting full, so we're going to be turning in dust on our way to our next 2D section. That said, we no longer really need to go to that debug platform for it, so we're just going to turn it in more or less the intended way. There's a dust drop-off point at the top of the elevator here, so we're going to right scale clip, and then we're going to do a pause glide to get back over to the elevator. So this is your photo sensitivity warning. That clip is a little trickier than the one to get in because the angle is shallower. Alright. We are done with the pause glide for now. There will be another big one before we get to the next 2D section, so this is fair warning. So for Act 2, also known as Blue Veil, which is the set of surroundings that we're in right now, there are only 3 2D sections, but there are 8 cards to collect. And the way that math works out is there are a couple of 2D sections that have 2 cards in them, and there's also a couple of cards hidden in 3D. So, for example, the first one we're going to get is right here, hidden in the roof of this car wash. So I need to go up onto the roof of this car wash. And in this chest here, 2, 3, it's a card. Here's our big pause glide incoming. There we go. So, what did that big pause glide accomplish? Well, the short version is it let us skip a rhythm minigame. The way this particular 2D section, this is Jeff Agrosite, by the way, the way this is supposed to work is you're supposed to drop down into that pit we flew over, talk to an NPC in the bottom of that pit, spark that NPC, do a rhythm minigame, and then you end up here, where we are right now. And the reason why we were able to enter that top part is what's going to happen after we get through the first pass of this section, because there are 2 passes. When we get through the first pass, we're going to end up on top of that pile of rocks. Then we're expected to do some platforming to get to the very tippy top and enter the dome that we just entered. That lets us into this section a second time, but with color and music and living people instead of gravestones. On the second pass, you go through and then you get the card at the end. But it turns out you can use the second entrance the first time and the second time, and in doing so, skip the need to do the rhythm minigame. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Trust me that this is the same dome as before, just with a worse camera angle, because you're very much not intended to get to it that way. And now we have music, we have color, we have living people. To get forward here, we have to talk to the NPCs, but specifically the ones that used to be gravestones. You'll also notice we picked up this key on the first pass. We're gonna turn it in now, because there is a second card hidden at the end of this little path here. It's just easier to pick up the card on the first pass, and instead of backtracking to use it, just use it on the second pass. You missed. The fire shooter missed. You've let me down. My friend. Alright. So, with that diversion out of the way, we're now just going through the rest of this 2D section. Not much to say about the rest of this one. Just talk to a bunch of NPCs. Except this one. That one we don't need to talk to. And just like that, we are done with Jeff Agricite. We have collected 3 more cards from Act 2, so we now have a total of 7 cards of the 12 we need to move on with the story. We also have now like almost 150 dust in the tank, which in the prism, which means a full tank will get us over the 200 we need, so we're not going to worry about turning in dust anymore either. Alright, I'm going to climb up some specific textures here. Get out of that pit. That's where we were supposed to enter that 2D section, is that NPC that we spawned next to. Alright, and now we're going to drive along the freeway a little bit. In this next room, we're going to do a pause float into a pause glide, because there is a secret behind the waterfall, as there always should be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a lot more pause gliding, by the way. I thought that might have happened. Alright. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you can get tripped up by the dialogue box. If you try to jump while that dialogue box pops up, it will eat your jump, which is what happened there. It's fine. Alright. We're going to head into this lake, open up the pipe, and walk over. If you ever see me walking in an area and not turning into a car, it's because I can't turn into a car. Because the car is always faster. And one last pause glide for good measure. And we are on to our next 2D section. This is Iwasaki Antemon. My favorite thing about Iwasaki Antemon is that his name scans to the tune of Camptown Races. I'll let you ponder that while I do this rhythm minigame. Iwasaki Antemon, doo-da, doo-da. The theme here is snow and ice. Which will be immediately apparent once we spawn in here. You're going to see snow slimes, and you're going to see ice spikes with orbiting ice cubes. But also, the most dangerous enemy in the game exists here. And the most dangerous enemy in this game are snowmen. Not these snow slimes, they're fine. They're a little obnoxious sometimes, but they're fine. No, the snowmen are the real danger. You'll see them in just a minute. First, gotta navigate a couple of side paths, pick up some keys. There is another extra card here. There's a snowman, by the way. They set off that warning siren, and then they start chasing you relentlessly. And if they collide with you, they explode. And that explosion does 2 points of damage. The only other thing in the game that does 2 points of damage is the final boss's attacks. So, you know. That's why they're the most dangerous enemy in the game. Alright. That said, I managed to get through there without taking any damage, which is nice. Because of the snowman, this is one of the few spots in the game where your health really matters. Most of the time, you get a full heal from every save point, and there's save points peppered along the way, but this is one of the few spots where if you take damage early on, you need to take a safety save to not die. And it's not even about respawning better if you do die, it's just taking the save and getting full health will get you through the section fine. But remarkably, I am at full health at the end of all of that, and I did not take a safety save, so, you know, that's pretty good. We're just about done here with Iwasaki. We do have to take a brief detour through 3D. If you're playing this casually, you could inspect the house and inspect the mailbox to get some lore about Iwasaki and Iwasaki's idol and a whole bunch of cool character stuff. I recommend playing this game for the cool character stuff, because the cool character stuff is great. And of course, you're not going to see it in the speedrun, because speedrun. And that is Iwasaki Antimon, all the Doodah-Day. We've got our third and final 2D section of Act 2 coming up here. This is Lawnway Jonstein and his brother, Clonway Jonstein. Or if you want to make the actual relationship more apparent, you can pronounce it Loneway and Cloneway. But first, we have one more card in 3D to get. We've collected 10 cards so far. We've got 2 more. Here's one of them. 1, 2. And then we've got another pause float into another pause glide. 4, 5, 6. Ooh. Alright. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not sure why that one didn't work, but I guess we'll skip the pause glide then. And there's Lawnway, and here's Clonway. We got another rhythm minigame. Alright, so the gameplay gimmick here, Clonway, is you're going to have a little shadow buddy that mirrors your movements on the other side of the screen. And so they can press these shadow buttons, which you cannot. They get destroyed by this shadow goop, raspberry jam. They can turn spikes into shadow spikes, which will chase you down. The shadow spikes can also press buttons. And the shadow spikes also get destroyed by the raspberry jam, should they touch it. But you can manipulate them by just standing in places and also pulling them with your vacuum cleaner. And then in some of the rooms, the shadow clone will try to get in your way if you just try to go to the exit. So you have to intentionally dunk them in the jam, like here. And then you get to actually proceed. This 2D section is separated into a series of 3 chambers. That was chamber 1. We're moving on to chamber 2. Introduces these teleporters, which will swap the positions of you and your shadow buddy. This is the hardest 2D section of Act 2. At least the hardest one to do quickly and precisely. Because if you screw up, odds are pretty good that you have to reset the room entirely. Which can eat up a lot of time in a speedrun if you have to do that. Here's another room where we have to do an intentional dunking. And that's the end of chamber 2. We're on to the 3rd and final chamber. There, you gotta make sure to hit that top button first, because when you go for that bottom button, you will end up dunking your friend into the raspberry jam. Here you have to be careful to not accidentally touch one of these spikes, because once they are a shadow spike, they can only be defeated by the powers of raspberry jam, and there is none in that room. Ooh, good, we got a good cycle there. That's on a global timer, so you have to kind of hope that your pathing through the rest of that section is pretty good, so that it's at a good spot in the cycle when you get there. It was here, which is good. Thankfully, it's not a very long cycle, so even if you do miss the good cycle, you don't have to wait for super long. One last intentional dunking. And that's it. That is Clonway Onstein. And that is the end of Act 2. We're going to split here in just a second. So, unfortunately, what's going to happen next is our main character is going to undergo a bit of trauma. And the way that's going to manifest in a gameplay perspective is you're going to be slowed down, you're going to be staggering, you're going to fall over a lot. It's just not going to be great. In particular, we're going to watch this cutscene. We're going to start after we finish the cutscene by falling over, slowly getting to our feet, taking 8 slow steps before we get back to full speed. While you're doing the slow steps, you cannot turn into a car. You'll just fail to do so if you try. But after we get back up to regular speed, you'll be able to turn into a car again. With a catch. There is an invisible timer going on that as long as you are at full speed, if the timer runs out, you will de-transform and fall back over again. However, that invisible timer is reset when you change screens. So in this next room in particular, we're going to try to make some very precise movements to try and get through this screen without running out that timer. It's a very near thing, even when you do it successfully. But I think we got it there. Yeah, we got it. Alright, I'm going to do some pause spam to get over this railing. Because if I de-transform to jump there, I will have to go through the entire fall down, get back up, slow walk process again. And then here I am forced to drop out of car form to watch this cutscene where our main character, Nova, is confronting a metaphorical representation of her grief, essentially. and has decided the only way out is through. And it takes a lot out of you. It's just how it is. But also, we had visions that this tower is where we need to go. So this is where we're heading. At the top of this tower, there is a fruit. And that fruit, we think, holds all the answers. So we are going to try to shrink into that fruit. No longer allowed to be a car here, so we're just going to run over, touch the sigil, which inverts this giant tower and lets us fall up the tower. These red and gray jellyfish things will bounce you back up if you land on them, so I'm going to be avoiding them because up is not the direction we want to go. We wish to be going down. And here we're going to jump at a somewhat precise spot to make sure we don't fall down before we cross the threshold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Might be a little bit of pause gliding here. Make sure we actually land on the platform. And then we try to enter the fruit, but then this dog shows up, and this dog eats the fruit. So now we're going to try to enter the dog. The dog is going to jump around the arena here, but it's always to the same spots in the same order. So I know it's going to go up there where I can't reach it, but then down here where I can, and then over here where I can finish the job. And we have made it to Dustbound Village, which is the longest 2D section of the game, with maybe the exception of the final 2D section. I'm not sure which one's actually longer. Let's talk real quick about cutscene spawn displacement. So, if you're in 2D and you're going from a cutscene to another cutscene, and you're holding down directions on the D-pad, which I am right now, I'm holding down and right, you'll actually start moving before the second cutscene starts, and in doing so, you can get a head start on your movement to wherever you need to go after the cutscene. So, for example, here, I'm supposed to spawn next to the bed, and instead, I'm halfway across this room already. I'm going to be using that a bunch of times here. I'm not going to call out every single one, but just assume if you see me going from a cutscene to another cutscene, I'm holding some kind of direction. So first we got to do a quick grand tour of this place. Witness a funeral here. And then we talk to these important NPCs. And now we're going to walk over to the train station. Take the train. Perfectly normal, ordinary train. Nothing unusual here. Don't worry about it. Yep. Perfectly ordinary train. It's fine. And we're going to go visit the hand fruit shrine. So here's our shrine. This is the fruit we were trying to get into. We have found it. And so what's essentially going to happen here, now that we've had the grand tour, is we are going to... Our character is undergoing, essentially, getting used to this new place, getting used to a brand new routine. And the way that's going to reflect in the gameplay is we're going to do a couple different types of segments repeated multiple times. So first up, we have gardening. This is going to be gardening 1. And the gardening is the most similar to the gameplay you've seen so far. There's a series of rooms. You kill all the enemies in the rooms. It's called gardening because you're getting rid of these weed enemies to protect the crops. Please hit the snowman. Thank you. So that was gardening 1. Now we're going to walk down to the train station yet again, go over to the shrine to do our first ritual. This will be ritual 1. some water. The rituals are always the same. Step 1, roll the dice. Step 2, cross the rickety bridge. Step 3, send a sacrifice down the slide. And that's the ritual. Alright, and now finally we've got wrestling. So these are mini-game / boss fights. I am pretending to hit my opponent here by letting go of the shoot button as my projectile is near my target, but not actually hitting my target. Now I'm going to pretend to get hit by hitting the get hit button when the projectile is near me, and you can cheese that one by mashing. And now we've got a QTE, where we do some back and forth fighting here. The last input is always Y. And then to end this, we do a back and forth where I shoot something at him, he reflects it back at me, and I pretend to get hit by it. Great. That was Wrestling 1. The future wrestlings will get a little bit more complicated. But for now, we have Gardening 2. One of the guys escaped. That doesn't happen very often. The start of this room is always a mess because there's just so many enemies in such a small space. And it's hard to get a consistent pathing that will get all the enemies cleanly. I need it. That was Gardening 2. That is actually the final gardening segment. There is no Gardening 3. But now we're going to go do Ritual 2. Followed by Wrestling 2, followed by Ritual 3, followed by Wrestling 3, with a bunch of cutscenes peppered in there in the middle. This is where text skip and setting the language to simplified Chinese save the most time, because there's just a lot of cutscenes and a lot of text that happens in this part of the game. Alright, so to start Wrestling 2, we do some back and forths where I get a hit in, he gets a hit in, I get a hit in, etc. Then we're going to do another quick time event. Down, 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 left, right, down, B, Y. Then we're going to do some more back and forths. And then I'm going to stun him, suck him up, and shoot him out of the ring, and I win Wrestling 2. Now we've got some cutscenes. Alright. And then from here, we're going to be going over to the train station yet again. We're going to go do Ritual 3. Should be a good time. The writing in this part of the game is quite good. Like, this is where you get a lot of insight into Nova, our main character's actual character, because up until now, she's been a silent protagonist. And starting here, you actually get to hear her voice. Not literally, there's no voice acting, but she has actual dialogue. Anyways, here's Wrestling 3. You start with some more back and forths. Then we do another QTE. Up, left, down, up, down, up. Other than the last one, these are random. I have to actually react to them. And now we have what I call the DDD section, which should be obvious why I call it that if you've played any Kirby game. And then we have some energy tenants that you can absolutely cheese by just standing next to them and mashing. And that's it for Dustbound Village. So, this is the longest cutscene of the game. This is going to be like 2.5 minutes of cutscene. Good place to stretch, good place to get in donations, host updates, what have you. I intend, as part of my submissions, to offer an incentive of upgrading any percent to all cards. If that incentive were to get accepted, this is the cutoff spot for it. Because the first half of those two routes, those two runs, are exactly the same up until this point. And so during this cutscene, you'd cut that off, and then I would change accordingly the second half of the run. Or, I guess, for this, it'd be the the last third of the run versus the last half of the run, because it adds about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. I'm going to split here in just a moment. But we still got more cutscene to do. Let's take some more water. That's it for this video. We're sticking to the any percent routing. So, this is, as you can see by the splits, the next step is a dust grind. So, to beat the game at the end and get the good ending, what we need now are a collar base, 3 color pieces, and 150 dust in the prism. Since our tank only holds 90, that means we need to turn in dust at least twice. So what we're going to do right now is go grind 60 dust, turn that in, and then go do the rest of the collecting for the rest of the game. Getting those color base and color pieces that I mentioned. You'll notice I center the camera behind me in the direction that I'm moving, because when you turn into a car, the car is always facing the direction the camera is facing. And the camera's turning speed is better than the car's turning speed, so... what am I doing? What am I doing? I need to go grind dust. I was heading straight to the next section and skipping the dust grind. Oops. It's fine. 1, 2. One, 2, 3. So, best place to grind dust is right here in Clonway-Jonstein. In like this second room here. Just on these 3 slimes. And we're going until we hit 60. Thankfully, this doesn't take very long. Started going to Desert NPC because I've also been practicing the all cards route, and that's, like I said, that's where the routes diverge. Is if you're doing all cards, you skip this dust grind entirely because you're just gonna pick up enough dust along the way naturally. but you're not going to do that here. So you got to actually grind a little bit of dust. There'll be another spot where we grind more dust up to a full tank, but or I guess since I got 64 here, I only need to grind up to 86 later. Yeah, that wrong turn clearly cost us some time, but it's fine. Alright. Now, we're gonna go do Desert NPC, which is what I started to do before. So, we gotta collect 3 color pieces. The way the color pieces work is there's actually 5 locations they can be, and the first 3 of those you open have the color pieces, and the other 2 have some bonus collectibles that we don't care about. That means we're going to go pick the 3 of those 5 chests that are the fastest to get to. And one of them is over here in Desert NPC. So let's go meet the dolphin, as it is colloquially known. Here's the dolphin. You may be thinking, wow, that looks weird and broken. You may be thinking, that looks like a pretty difficult rhythm minigame. You may be thinking, this is a long road, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So anyway, here's no such scene. That jingle means we found a color piece. And we get the dust crystal and we're done, right? 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 Let's play something else for a little bit. This is Nora. Welcome to Her Boring Life. Which I say because that's the name of the track that is playing right now. Alright. We're going to take a specific pathing to get out of here. Left. Up. Right. Up. Bit of a maze to get out of the apartment building here to go to work. But if you take that particular path, that is the shortest path through. If you take too long, it'll eventually take pity on you and just kind of kick you out. Check social media, decide, you know, that's a bad idea. Probably be correct. And move on. Go to bed. The next day, we're going to go look out the window. We're going to say hello to the conspicuous absence of a gargoyle. We're going to leave to go to work. We're going to come back from work. We're going to say hello to the gargoyle that's suddenly in front of our apartment. I'm sure that's fine. We're going to check social media. This time we decided, oh, I guess we actually will check social media tonight. And then we're going to go to bed. And we're going to have some cutscenes. And then what would normally follow after these cutscenes is an honest-to-goodness horror segment in this game. But the developers were kind enough to realize, hey, this is so unlike anything else that's going on in this game. And it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea. So we're going to just give you an option to climb out the fire escape and not deal with it. And it turns out not dealing with it is also way faster. So as speedrunners, we also skip that section. So, on my way there, you might have noticed that I talked to a couple of trees. And I'm now going to go talk to another tree. There's 5 trees hiding out in this area, and you have to talk to all 5 of them in a specific order. And if you do so, you unlock a new area. So I just talked to tree number 3 there. We'll pick up trees 4 and 5 in a minute. But first, we have to go to Orb. This is Orb. It's not a very spherical orb, but it's an orb nonetheless. This is Minerva. There is actually no rhythm minigame here. This is Orb Sector 4-16-5. And what you're normally supposed to be doing here is this little fashion minigame where you are taking orders from various residents of the towers and turning them in. But again, we're doing any percent here. We're not trying to actually complete the full game. We're just trying to get to the end as quickly as possible. So, turns out the part that we actually need is that color piece. And once we get it, we can just leave. And so we're just gonna grab it and walk right out. And that was Orb. Alright. Now we're gonna go back and talk to the rest of those trees, like I mentioned earlier. We're going to get our 3rd and final color piece, along with the rest of the dust that we need. So, here's tree number 4. And over here is tree number 5. And we have one last rhythm minigame for the road. And there we go. That is our final rhythm minigame for the run. Alright. So if you've played Anodyne 1, or even if you watched the run from SGDQ 2023, you might notice that section of the game looks kind of familiar. It's kind of a callback to Anodyne 1, and if you go and explore some of the post-game content and read up on some of the story, it kind of loosely, but not very well, explains how the two games are actually related, but they're mostly not. You can certainly play Anodyne 2 without having ever played Anodyne 1. The opening text scroll has a message from the developers that says as much. In case, so this 2D section is kind of different. It's a large open area that you actually get to explore. Unfortunately, we will not be doing much of that exploring because we just need that color piece and a whole bunch of dust. And thankfully, there's a room right over here where we can easily get a whole bunch of dust. So, welcome to the grind room. We'll need to make probably 2 passes through this room. Usually gets the job done. Oh wait, right. 86 is good enough because I got 64 earlier. Let me just double check that. Yeah. Get on the raft, please. And now we can leave. Raft will cooperate. Take that warp pad as a shortcut back to the hub. And there we go. Alright. So all of those color pieces need to go on a color base. So we're going to go pick that up on our way to go turn it in. This is going to be our last pause glide of the run, so our last photosensitivity warning. That was the color base. No fancy jingle for that one, but it is absolutely mandatory. And that one is always in the same spot. You just have to go open that chest at some point. So, you might be wondering, why did we collect all of those color pieces? Why would we need a color? And that's because there is a certain dog that has a certain village within him that we need to go visit. So we are once again inverting this tower and falling up the tower. This time we'll just walk along the floor here because we're no longer worried about falling over and getting tired and all that stuff. One, two, three, four, 5. And here's our friend the dog. Dog's so nice, we pet it twice. And now we can enter the dog. And come back to Dustbound Village. Except, everything's been cleaned up, and no one remembers who we are. And we are very sad about it. So we come over here. Open this chest. And these two NPCs managed to evade the cleaning up of Dustbound Village and are here to tell us that, hey, things are bad. You should go fix it. And this is where we learn, hey, the people that we've been working for the entire game might actually be the bad guys. So we should probably do something about it. So we're going to go do something about it. And that something involves the 150 dust that we collected. But first, we have to actually get back to the center. So, back down the tower. Now we just get to fall down the tower. I think they'd install a staircase at some point. Nope, just gravity. I think the name of the tower is literally Gravity Spire Tower. So, you know, I guess it makes sense. It's on brand, as it were. And this is our last little section of 3D movement. We're going to be heading into the final 2D section of the game. Probably the most difficult 2D section of the game. This is also the big difference between the good ending and bad ending routes. For the bad ending route, you need to fully fill out the prism, farm 350 dust, and then go to the center to trigger the end of the game. And that is... It's a lot less interesting as a speedrun to end your run with, in my opinion, which is why I prefer to play the good ending categories. So yeah, we're gonna turn in dust. We have 150. And that lets us go over here where there's a gag here about, are you sure you want to do this? But are you really sure? But are you really, really sure? We just mashed through all of those pretty quickly. And now I'm not going to touch the controller while this cutscene is happening because as I have learned the hard way before, you can move in between these cutscenes, and if you do that, you move out of the cutscene trigger that gets you to this spot of the cutscene, and you end up just in a black void. and have to blindly navigate back into the cutscene trigger. I have lost a run to that before, so I just put down the controller for that cutscene to make sure it doesn't happen. And here we are, Nano Cleaner Zera, the longest and hardest 2D section of the game. So, bunch of new gameplay gimmicks too. We have these pink spikes that will go down if you shoot them, which by the way, we can shoot in 2D now. But will also damage you and enemies. You have bubbled enemies that you have to break the bubble before you can damage the enemy within. We've got boomerang enemies that work the way you would expect the boomerang to work. And that's basically it. And we are trying to find and destroy the 3 elements of a balanced breakfast that we saw way, way back in the tutorial of the game. So, that is our goal right now. Because we have shrunken into the next generation of Nano Cleaner and are trying to break the cycle. The bubbled boomerang enemies will fly around forever as long as their bubble is not broken. So we have to manipulate them to hit and destroy all the spikes. And we of course have the ultimate set of split paths where there are 6 different paths from the start, essentially. And you have to do all of them. 3 of them have keys. The other 3 require the keys in order to get to the elements at the end. Just barely missed. Getting that cycle there is kind of tough, because you want to make sure that the shooter doesn't go into the spikes as it tracks you, because that will destroy the shooter. You can see it as I walk down here. Alright, we picked up 2 keys. Let's go start spending some of them. Gonna just open up that gate for later. Go, and here is our first element of a balanced breakfast. It's the bowl of cereal. We can shrink even further into the bowl of cereal, and you just gotta use the vacuum on it to get it to stop moving around, and then jam out 10 shots as quickly as you can. That's 1 down, 2 to go. This next side path introduces one unique mechanic, which are these red blood gates. And the only way to open the red blood gates is to get damaged. So the trick in these rooms is figuring out how to damage yourself with the tools you're given. Including a return of the snowman. You have to intentionally get yourself blown up. Here's our second element of nurturing / element of balanced breakfast. We've got the coffee maker. The coffee maker is written like it's an adorable puppy, and the game calls you a monster for destroying it. But also, it's actually just an implement of evil, so whatever. We need this bubbled enemy to be a shield for us against this super fast shooter. Knock down some spikes. We're going to get our last key. And now we have to walk all the way back to the beginning, because we went left at the very beginning, because it had 5 of the 6 paths we needed to go down. Now we need that 6th path. So here, going to the right, you can see 2 of those gates have dropped. We need to go drop the 3rd one. Safety save there just in case. Probably won't need it, but you never know. And you have time while the key animation is playing out anyways. There, you have to bait the snowman into that spike to open the way forward. Here, I'm going to intentionally take damage off of this bubble boomerang so it doesn't go out of control and accidentally hit one of the baby slimes. And here's our 3rd and final element of a balanced breakfast, the bottle of milk. Again, vacuum it to get it to stop moving, and then 10 shots as quick as you can. And all that is left now is the final boss of the game, which is, of course, one of the most difficult things in the game. Personally, I wouldn't have it any other way. Nice bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels good as a capstone to the speedrun, is what I'm trying to say. So, the boss is got 3 phases, and we're gonna do each phase in 2 cycles. So, that's 1 cycle. Alright, 2 cycles for the first phase, that's good. It gets harder with each one, because the arm stays extended for a shorter period of time. So you gotta be really on point with your mashing. 1, 2, 3. Here we need to shoot the spikes that are coming in from the sides up at the target that's moving along the top. And that's phase 1 down. Exterior phase 2. We've now got a turret in the upper right corner. There we go. 2 cycles for that one, too. Not too bad. Alright, same thing as before, except now the thing along the top is shooting at me. 3, 4. The double hit doesn't actually mean anything there, but there's no way to get both of those spikes to hit the target with where they're positioned, so it's just those 6 always. Now there's turrets in both the upper corners. Alright, that's cycle 5. Ooh, just barely the 6th cycle. We'll take it. Alright, we should be home free now. Now we've got spikes on half the room. We can take a point of damage there and be able to get all the rest of the hits in without taking damage. There we go. Interior phase 3 done. And there's going to be a horrible screeching noise incoming. And time is going to be when the screen fades to black. Right now. That's time. So yeah, a little bit of time lost, mainly around that wrong turn that I took, but it's fine. 1:17:11 is very much a respectable time for this game. My PB, of course, is also the world record, which I believe is what, 1:15 and something. I don't remember the exact seconds. It's like 1:15:51. But yeah, that is going to do it for this speedrun. Thank you. If you're here from the selection committee, thank you for taking the time to watch this and consider my run. I'm going to let the credits play out. For purposes of the leaderboard verification, when it comes to all cards runs, it is requested that you let the credits play out and then load back into your save file afterwards so that you can verify that you have, in fact, collected all the cards. Now, that's not necessary for any percent, but I run both categories, and I like to be in the habit of doing that. So I'm going to do that on this video. But obviously, the run's over. If we were doing this in a marathon, you could cut now. You know, we'd say our goodbyes. You cut now, you move on to setting up for the next run. Great. Not a problem. I guess the other thing I'll mention is incentives. Like I said, what I intend to submit as an incentive is upgrading any percent to all cards, because you can kind of just hold off on that decision until around the 50-minute mark, and then determine which route you're actually taking, if the goal has been met or not, and from there move on with the rest of the run as planned. But yeah. Gonna fast forward through the credits here. There we go. Whoops. Coaster I'm using stuck to the bottom of my water bottle. Briefly. Alright. Let's load back into that save file. Just go through the cards real quick. Again, this is just a matter of I like to be in this habit. We'll set the language back to English. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and this one down here. 14. Yep, that's 12 cards that you have to get to Act 3, and 1 card forced by the story, and 1 card because it happens to be on the way to one of the color pieces. Alright, that's going to do it for this recording. Once again, thank you for taking the time to consider the speedrun, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!